Parang konti lang yung nagsalita ngayon. Is it because it's Saturday? Or or 40 in the list? Okay, sige. Anyway, though we've mentioned or there were already discussions about the globalization of world economy, and I even sent you a recorded discussion. Let me just go over by giving you the summary of the discussion on this topic before we proceed to the next topic. And as I think I have mentioned it, that uh, we will be having a quiz assignment on this one. I've already sent the quiz assignment. It will be due by next week at the same time. And we will be discussing, or you will have an activity actually today to be on your own after the summary. Well, I'll probably introduce to you the history of global politics, but I think uh, as I deemed necessary to understand better the whole history of the globalization of world economy, it's important also that we get to understand the history of globalization based on the economic perspective. Ma-relate para mas ma-relate natin kung bakit ganun yung setup ng mundo ngayon. Okay? So, today is the 2nd of the 2nd of September. So, uso na pud mogawas na pud si Jose Marichan karon. Ito daw Pasko, hopefully. Okay. Kindly raise your hand once your name is called. For the attendance, raise your hands. Type present, sorry. Wala man nag-shell face to face. Raise your hand. Kindly type present once your name is called. Abelia Lady Mabel. Okay. Abinoha Paul Christian. Abinoha Paul Christian. Wala. Aquino Erica. Aquino Erica. Wala pa din. Baliong Bun Michelle. Okay. Bariwan Fareda. Okay. Bernardino Loren. Okay. Bourbon Catherine. Okay. Bustamante Joanna. Okay. Kanya Jerly Marie. Castillo Micaela. Okay. Chan Maxine. Okay. Cochesa Rachel. Okay. Dayanan Denrick. Okay. De Dios Bianca. Di Mario Princess. Hindi makatype si Princess Livia. Escobedo Glisel. Ferrer Sean. Ferrer Sean. Wala. Garces Eliza. Garces Eliza. Gulpo Renalyn. Javier Nicole. Umalon John Dexter. Lariba Lloydie Rose. Lori Sofia. Lumakang Tresha. Okay. Maru Cheng. Okay. Makidato Patricia. Makidato Patricia. Wala pa. Mejos Maria Victoria. Montojo Roger. Montojo Roger. Okay. Navarrosa Hanelin. Navarrosa Hanelin. Oracion Ina Carmela. Hiding Gwyneth. Saol Donald. Kimno Camille. Kimno Camille. Wala pa. Roma Gia. Salvador Sheikaira. Savares Irene Joyce. Sombrero Sara. Si Camille. Eh, hopefully magdating na yung iba. Okay. So, last meeting, we started to discuss globalization of world economy. We mentioned about IMF trying to make a definition or a how did they regard a economic globalization, but it's a historical process, so it should be understood in that level, which represent the result of human innovation and technological progress. So because of kumbaga, the process of seeing economic globalization should not be seen at the present moment alone, but it should be seen as a historical process, in which case the result of which are actually or it represent that the result of this economic globalization is seen in human innovation and technological progress, so that it can be considered as a increasing integration of economies. Kumbaga, we can understand economic globalization because there is already the increasing integration of economies. So dili na limited ang economic interconnections or international trading, okay? Or anything that we can say that the economy of other countries has been reached out by other countries around the world. So that's the usual characterization of economic globalization, which is seen through the movement of goods, services, and capital across the world. So we can even observe the movement of this goods and services, which indicates increasing integration of economies. When we compare the percentage of world GDP from 1980 to 2007, roughly coming from 42.1 to 62.1, so tumaas ng additional 20%. It also shows class that when there is an increase of trade, it also means that there is an increase or there is also a movement of investments all over the world at faster speeds. So mas mabilis yung pagpasok at paglabas ng mga investments all over the world, hindi lang sa isang uh, country. And even UNICTAD have mentioned that in 1982, the amount of foreign investment flowing across the world were just roughly $57 billion. But after 33 years, it multiplied 18 times. So naging $1.76 trillion in 2015. This shows of the dramatic increase in global trade in just a span of few decades. Okay? And if you observe, it only is 2015. Today's time or today's year is 2023. Ano na kaya kung ngayon? Okay? So, okay, nandito na si Erica. Okay. So, one of the identifier why there is a fast movement of foreign direct investment flowing across the world was actually also because of the presence of the increased speed and frequency of trading, like the situation of the supercomputers, which execute millions of stock purchases and sales between different cities in a matter of seconds through a process called high frequency of trading or high frequency trading. And that we can observe in different situations like the case of 10 years ago, wherein book, and nandito na si Sean, wherein book and music are acquired physically. Okay? But nowadays, you can just access books and music, even movies, in just a span of minutes or seconds. Okay, so depending upon the case. So, kung titingnan natin kaya grabe ang, anong tawag nito? Grabe ang innovation to the extent that, uh, well, because of this innovation, parang mas bumibilis yung process ng mga bagay-bagay sa mundo. Imagine ebook before or book before is very difficult to bring and to buy, but eventually there are already digital copies that you could have. So you cannot really have a physical copy if digital, if ebook ang sa'yo. Pero imagine, pwede ka nang mag-download ng over 1,000 ebooks, save it to your phone, to your tablet, to your iPad, or even to your laptop. And it is as if you are bringing with you those more than 1,000 ebooks. Eh, in comparison to buying books and you can only limit the thing that you carry, kay bugat mo na libro, 'di ba? So inana ng kapaspas ang setup natin. Now, to understand world economy, it's also important that we understand the movement of economy from one nation to another nation until it reached globalization. And one of the factor that we need to identify with is actually the international trading system. Okay? So, one of the indicator that there is movement of goods and services is when it reaches to other country. Okay? And though Silk Road, as kumbaga, as one of the most recognized first activities that involve uh, integrating the economy of other nation states, shows that it's more of a network of pathways in the ancient world that actually span between China, Middle East, and Europe. It is called as such because the main commodity is actually silk, which is highly priced before. If you are fond of watching historical movies, whether that's in Asia, Middle East, or in Europe, so ang identifier nila noon pag mayaman ka is yung sa pananamit mo, especially with your silk. Okay, so they use Silk Road from 130 BCE up until 1453. So that's more than 13th century. Okay, so 13th century bago na close siya during Ottoman Empire. But it shows that it reaches international despite not reaching global because they have no ocean routes before. So by land lang talaga. They were not able to reach the American continent, another part of the world. So ito yung pagpapakita, passing by here. Okay. So hanggang dito sa Greece. Ay hanggang dito sa Europe. Okay. So yan. Now, when asked the question, when does globalization begin? Flynn and Heraldez mentioned that it is when all important populated continents began to exchange products continuously. And they even identified it started with, trace it back in 1571 with the establishment of galleon trade, wherein galleon trade is actually a monopolistic trading that happened between Manila and Acapulco, in Mexico. So this is the first time that we were able to reach the Americas. But it also shows that it's already the starting point for Flynn and Heraldez that globalization would really sprout. Okay? Kasi hindi na lang land route. Okay? So umabot na siya sa mga seas. Now, galleon trade, though, runs from 16th to 18th century, wherein what they usually do is that the countries, especially those colonizers, in order to boost their country's economy, they compete with other country by selling more goods. Okay, so unfortunately, it eventually end up creating some sort of trade war, especially those countries that are being run by monarchs, to defend their regimes, the products from competitors who sold goods more cheaply, they usually impose high tariffs. Dako ang tax nga ilang ibutang kay para maglisod sila og sulod sa ilang country ug mapakita na dili affordable ang products bisan barato ang presyo sa pagbaligya nila tungod kay ah the tariff is so high. So if it's not affordable, kay dili kung dili nila patasan sa mga importers ang ilang ah, anong tawag niyan, prices, even if nagtaas yung tariffs, ang ending din hindi din mag-prosper or mag-continue ang pagbebenta ng mga different goods and services, yeah, goods to a specific country. Kay siyempre taas kayo ang tariff, so then dili man kayo maka-afford ang importers kay barato lang ba iyang products. So gano'n yung setup. Now, they also forbade colonies to trade with other nations para lang yun makontrol nga dili lang sila eh, kay tungod dili lang sila ang nag-do business and in order to compete more with other countries and even end up restricting trade routes and subsidizing their own exports. So the case of galleon trade under the age of mercantilism shows that mercantilism period was a system of global trade already, but with multiple restrictions. That's the reason why they end up deciding na, uy, dili na siya pwede. Dili ta maka anong tawag niyan, do business properly in this. So baka ma-exploit lang tayo and eventually it will create war. So that they adopted the open trade system that emerged in 1867 following the lead of big countries like UK, United States, and other European nations as they adopt the so-called gold standard at an international monetary conference in Paris. So what's the goal of adapting to gold standard? It is to create a common system that would allow for more efficient trade and prevent the isolationism of the mercantilist era. Okay, we know for a fact that uh, the case of mercantilist era is usually done by, kumbaga, ang nagiging prosperous lang is yung mga colonizers and at the same time, naapektuhan pa paulit-ulit yung mga colonized countries kasi they need to abide by their colony in order to para dili sila mapunish, para dili sila hilabtan sa ilang mga colonizers. And eventually, magiging sandwich yung posisyon nila kasi the competitor of the colonizer will also compete against them. So eventually, sila yung magiging front liner na mag-face sa away, kumbaga. So eventually, the world realized that they need to find a common system that would allow for more efficient trade and prevent the so-called isolationism. Now, the countries thus establish a common basis for currency, which is actually under the value of, all based on the value of gold. So, para magsabot pila presyo ano pilay ang say value ani so balik sila sa gold as their point of payment. Okay? So this created a so-called fixed exchange rate system na ang cambio sa pagpalit is actually gold. So gold standard is a fixed monetary regime under which the government's currency is fixed and may be freely converted into gold. So ganun yung setup niya. So it can be a freely competitive monetary system in which gold or bank receipts for gold act as the principal medium of exchange. Okay? So, however, with the setup of gold standard, hindi din siya nagtagal, especially during World War One, since kailangan ng mga country, while they were fighting against the other countries during the World War One, ng enough resources to buy products to fund for their military war against other countries. They eventually abandoned the gold standard and the resort to floating currency. So what is floating currency? It's a monetary system. Excuse me, okay. So what is floating currency? It's a monetary system that is not backed by gold. So nag-alis sila sa gold. So and or assets and tends to fluctuate in value. So magdepende siya sa value, magdepende siya karon ang value sa imong currency due to supply and demand market expectations, and its value is to be determined by global demand and the level of foreign reserves. So kumbaga, they are more now the basis of the value of the currency that you are using is how much can contribute to the world than needing the world. Kumbaga, unsa kadako ang imuhang sales sa pagbaligya sa products to other countries kaysa sa kung unsa kadako imuhang expenses when you buy products to other countries. So ganun yung setup sa floating currency. Now, one of the most important lesson and situation in history was Great Depression. Okay? Great Depression was the worst economic downturn in the history of the industrialized world, lasting for more than 10 years or for 10 years. It began in 1929, which sent Wall Street into a panic and wiped out millions of investors. So over the next several years, ito yung epekto, consumer spending investment drop, kay dili naman enough ang supply, okay? Because of the situation na nag-down ang economy. In the same time, since hindi na enough ang supply, and ang economy nag-down, wala nang masyadong investment na pumapasok, okay? That end up causing steep declines in industrial output, so and employment as failing companies laid off workers. So that by 1933 class, the lowest point of the Great Depression, some 15 million Americans were unemployed and nearly half of the country's banks had failed. So ganun yung setup sa Great Depression. Now, after abandoning gold standard during the World War One, okay, so they adopted the so-called fiat currency. Ano bang kaibahan ng fiat currency at saka floating currency? Okay? Ang fiat currency refers to still not being backed by gold but in reference to the central bank of the country. So kumbaga ang government nag-ingon nga kanang kwartang ginagamit karon like peso, Philippine peso, useful na siya kay tungod ginagamit din siya sa tawang country. Not because they are also using this one to other countries, but ginagamit din siya sa atong country and gitagaan ta og we are given the confidence and trust from the government that it always has its value as long as we can maintain our economy in relation to the economy of our country. So, na-value ang atong kwarta even if wala siya value sa uban, but ang value sa atong kwarta nagdepende po, always depends upon how uh, our government were able to stabilize our economy in relation to the economy of other countries, which is connected to the floating currency, yung still supply and demand. Manang kabantay mo class, the fiat currency is the fiat money that we are using, like peso to dollars. The value of peso lowers because in reference to dollars, because dollars is so strong, the extent that sometimes it's not because the peso is weak that the dollar is strong. At some point, the dollar is just strong that the peso is weak. Ganun yung setup. That's the explanation. Bakit tumataas yung anong tawag niyan? Yung currency ng dollars in comparison to peso. Okay? So, this system actually allows governments to freely and actively manage their economies by increasing or decreasing the amount of money in circulation as they see fit. So, ang advantage ani class kay the value of our money is usually awarded and being uh, stabilized by our own government so that they also have the capability to print our own fiat money para makita nila kung ano yung movement sa kwarta sa atuang society. So, there is a more intervention coming directly from the government. Now, the value of fiat money then is derived from the relationship, ito yung sinasabi ko kanina, between supply and demand and the stability of the issuing government rather than the worth of a commodity backing it, as is the case for the commodity money in relation to especially to gold. Though, ang pag-abandon sa gold standard class hindi a total abandonment na dili na gyud kinatagaag value ang gold. It's more of removing or not really removing, but considering that gold is not anymore the basis of exchange in different goods and their services across the world. So, isa na lang siya sa basis. May ano pa din na gold, if you have gold, you can make use of that as collateral, kumbaga, but hindi na siya the same. So, they are more intensifying the value of the fiat money that was being awarded and uh, pushed through by the government. Okay, so ganun yung setup. That most modern paper currencies are still fiat currencies including US dollars, the euro, and other major currencies. So, with the case of the fiat currency class, more particularly after the Great Depression, nagkaroon ng World War II, so from 1934 to 1943, when it was settled and na okay siya, so by 1944 to 1945, they tried to establish United Nations and eventually adopt some policies and systems that would ensure a global economic system that would ensure a longer lasting global peace. So kaya at in 1944, they inaugurated, as world leaders believe that of the ways to achieve the goal is to set up a network of global financial institutions that would promote economic interdependence and prosperity. So they end up convening in Bretton Woods, during the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference in 1944, which eventually end up creating the Bretton Woods system. So the Bretton Woods system is actually influenced by the British economist John Maynard Keynes. So sabi ni John Maynard Keynes, economic crisis occur not when a country does not have enough money, but when money is not being spent and thereby not moving. When economies slow down, government have to invigorate markets with infusions of capital. So with the coming of the fiat currency that allows the government of each country to intervene in the activities of the economy of the country as they are the one determining the value of the fiat money. So with the coming of the Bretton Woods system also, they were able to adopt the perspective of John Maynard Keynes na hindi mali kung magsige print og money ang government para may magamit ang tao. Ang problema lang is if hindi na yan gamitin ng tao or hindi na yan gina-spend, so hindi siya nag-move, okay? So, yan yung isang epekto. Kaya parang at some point, John Maynard Keynes somehow encouraged the government to infuse capital in the market. So isa din ito sa naging dahilan bakit na-abandon yung Bretton Woods system kanang so over-intervention of the government. Now, the active role of governments in managing spending serve as actually the anchor of what would be called a system of global Keynesianism. Kung anong active role sa government para mag-spend, para ma-improve ang economy. It's called global Keynesianism. So there were two banks or financial institutions that were created during the Bretton Woods system, ang IMF at saka World Bank. Ang purpose supposedly ng World Bank, from the long name of it, is it's in the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development kasi tinayo yan sila after World War II since there were a lot of countries needing their fundings. Okay? So IMF is to be the global lender of last resort. Ganun yung role nila. Pag mag-file of bankruptcy ang specific country kay dili na makaya sa iyahang government kay ang value sa kwarta halos wala na jud. So dito na mosulod si IMF. Today, these institutions remain key players in economic globalization. And to further their global economic integration, so they try to address the issue of trade restriction, and the imposition of high tariffs that had happened in the mercantilist era. So, since fiat currency na siya, and floating currency na siya. So there is a need for each nation state to really coordinate and interconnect with other nation state so that they've created the general agreement on tariffs and trade that had happened 3 years after the establishment of the Bretton Woods system in order to reduce tariffs and other hindrances to free trade. So ilang goal talaga is magkaroon ng free trade, ma-allow yung different countries na makik-integrate yung economy nila. Kahit tinayo nila yung GATT. I hope you are still following class. So, though there were a lot of things that happened that would eventually make the other economy of other country to appreciate global Keynesianism, as governments were able to actively participate in the economic development of their own country that allows pouring money into the economies, which end up people to purchase more goods kasi may pera. Imagine, so magsigig print si central bank, so mas kailangan ni central bank i-divulge or ay ipagawas ang kwarta. So either ipautang nila or ipangbayad sa sweldo, mga inana nga case. So, and end up, there will be a lot more money to be used, fiat money to be used in the local market because of the pouring of the money or printing of the money from the central bank. So, because of that, it increased actually demand for the products, for different products. So, kung daghang kwarta ang tao, syempre gusto man na niya i-spend, dili lang man na niya i-save. So, ang ending nga na, there will be more demands about series of products. So, sa kaninga case class, as demand increased, so did the prices of the goods. Syempre, sa scheme ng supply and demand, pag mataas ang demand sa supply. So, mutaas yun po ang presyo sa supply. Inana gyud ang case. Okay? It has a good effect on those rich and powerful countries like the Western and the Asian economies like Japan, as they are mostly exporters of products. So that they accepted this rise in prices because it also has accompanied for them general economic growth and reduced unemployment. Okay, for example, if in demand kayo ang Toyota sa Japan, so ang mahitabo, Japanese people will work the best that they could to provide Toyota cars all around the world. So ingana so napadayon ang trabaho, mag-reduce ang unemployment, okay, mag-improve ang economic growth ng specific country na naga-produce ng mga i-export nila na products towards important dependent countries. So sa global Keynesianism, ang unang naapektuhan in terms of improvement and development is usually yung mga first world countries na nag-generate ng mga malalaking income, okay? Ng malalaking earning because of the pouring of the government's money to the economy, to their own local economy, okay? That eventually increase the demand of the products from other countries. Okay? However, ito yung theory niya, class. So, as prices increase, companies would earn more and would have more money to hire workers. So, ma-reduce ang unemployment. Keynesian economists believe that all was a necessary trade-off for economic development. So, bisan pag nitaas ang presyo, pero kailangan siya, kumbaga, para mataas pod ang economic, para mag-develop pod economically ang specific country. Kaya lang, wala nila nakita nga this is usually applicable to the first world countries. But if you belong in the developing countries, so dili jud kayo siya nakatabang kay mostly man good sa developing countries. Magtaas lang ang demand pero we don't actually provide so much services and products also to other countries. So nagiging import dependent tayo. So naapektuhan yung economy natin kasi mas mataas yung percentage ng pagbili natin ng products sa other countries then pagbenta ng products natin sa ibang countries. Okay, so ganoon yung setup. Nasakyan pa ng case na nangyari sa uh, Yom Kippur War when the Arab and the Israeli had a fight. Okay? So nag-impose og oil embargo si Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, kinalagot sila sa US and other European countries as they resupply the Israeli military with the needed arms during the Yom Kippur War. So sa kanilang case with the oil embargo, the imposing of the oil embargo, the Arab nations were able to stabilize their economies. However, since Western countries were reliant in oil, kaya syempre, kahit na marami silang na-produce, they cannot produce fuel that makes their activities going further. So, kaya ganun yung setup. So, eventually, wait, okay. So, eventually, nakadagdag pa, okay, na yung mga series of situations ba na murag kumbaga ma-abandon sa ubang sa sitwasyon ato nga panahon na ang Bretton Woods system. yung crash of stock markets that happened like between 1973 to 1974, or in, as what I mentioned kanina, hindi pa totally nawala yung value ng gold. But when USA decided, just because most of the money being used na ginapautang sa World Bank at saka sa IMF is US dollars, so they stopped linking dollar to gold. So nag-ubos og value ang ilang kwarta, nag nag-drop or nag-crash ang stock market, motoy end sa Bretton Woods system. Okay? So because the result of it were stagflation, wherein there was a decline in economic growth and employment, okay, which is stagnation, together with a sharp increase in prices. So imagine, mo ni siya isa sa risk, kana galing, sa Bretton Woods system ang gold, they are following the global Keynesianism perspective na it's okay to infuse more money coming from the government as long as the people are using it. Pero ang nahitabo di ay, because of so much infusion of money coming from the government, meaning to say, grabe sila ang ilang intervention sa economy, ang ending niyan, yung pera na gina-produce, ginabigay nila sa tao, always na ginagamit yung ng tao, so it's moving. But the problem is, nakalimutan nila yung sa law of supply and demand. Kung magtaas ang supply, kung magtaas ang demand, not because of necessity, but because of wants, okay? Tapos, hindi masyadong ma-contain or mabigay yung supply na hinihingi, may tendency talaga na magkakaroon ng inflation. Tataas yung presyo, bababa yung value ng pera. Okay? Pag daghan na kay kwarta sa market tapos kulang na ang supply. Tapos ang ending pag yun, because of the high prices, nag-lower pod ang investments, okay? Eventually nag-lower pod ang employment. Okay? Usually investments or employment is being fueled by different investments coming to the country. So yun yung isang ending ng Bretton Woods system. Now, those who are not in favor of Bretton Woods system introduce a new type of economic system, economic idea. And these are Hayek and Friedman. They argued, class, that the government's practice of pouring money actually into their economies had caused inflation. Okay, by increased demand for goods without necessarily increasing supply. So, ganun yung setup. Taas kayo ang demand, pero wala tayo nagtaas ang supply. Kaya syempre, may manong itaas ang demand. Dili naman lang because they needed those products, but because they wanted those products as they have a lot of money. Now, Hayek and Friedman argue that government intervention, which is one way, is them always printing money so that it will kumbaga revolve around the market. So because of government intervention in economies, it actually distort the proper functioning of the market. So muna siyang murag na lesson nila. So eventually, it became a codified strategy for US Treasury Department and other organizations. And with the coming of the WTO, the World Trade Organization, after gipulihan siya, replaced, after gi-replace ang GATT, okay, isulod ang World Trade Organization, which is still to continue the tariff reduction. Okay, isa lang man din po sa rason na nung dapat para mag-prosper ang economy, kay as long as there is free trade and tariff reduction, so mas makontrol, kumbaga mas madaling makontrol ang movement ng economy kasi mas mataas yung chance na ma-integrate yung different economies around the world. Now, the result of which is the abandonment of global Keynesianism and the adoption, especially with the policies being forwarded, of the Washington Consensus. So the Washington Consensus dominated the global economic policy. So gi-abolish or gi-abandon nila tong idealism nga okay lang mag-print og a lot of money basta gamiton lang sa tao. Kaya nakita nila kay bisag unsa pag gamiton sa tao, kung ang problem pod is sa supply and demand, kay taas na kayo ang demand, so di na siya kinahanglan, gamay pa ang supply, okay, so maapektuhan yung economy. So kaya ang ending niyan, Washington Consensus came in. So yung mga advocate niya pushed for minimal spending to reduce government debt. So ano yung mga steps para ma-reduce yung government debt by pushing government for minimal spending? So they called for privatization of government controlled services like water, power, communities, transport. Okay? believing that the free market can produce the best results. So, mo na siyang epekto itong paglingkod na din ni President Corazon Aquino. Sa iyang paglingkod, mo na po ni ang isa sa kusog na time sa world before nga gi-advise, gi-pressure nila, they pressure the governments, particularly the developing world like Philippines, to reduce tariffs and open their economies. And also sell those government-owned services to private individuals. So, the reason for this is that it's actually the quickest way to progress. Totoo naman, class, if you observe, if there is always competition in the market, the price of the products lowers. For example, noon, halos few individuals lang talaga makaka-afford ng mobile phones. Tapos Motorola pa o Nokia sa unang kanang keypad pa. Eh. But eventually, with the coming of different brands of mobile phones, so naging compete siya to the extent na nag-lower pod ang iyang value. Okay? So actually na ay good effect kung i-open mo imong economy tapos i-reduce nimo ang tariffs. Ang bad effect lang ani duha, one is the coming of the transnational corporations which may end up absorbing other local industry because in competition they have more resources than the local industry. Pangalawa is the inability of the government to protect our own local industry. Okay? That they end up ibaligyan nila ilang mga yuta. Okay? For example, sa farming industry, so with the advent of or with the coming of different transnational corporations as tariffs were reduced and their own economies yung mga nasa developing countries like Philippines, okay? So they open up their economies to other countries. So along the way, certain industries have been affected. Ito yung sinasabi ko nga, kung dili man i-absorb, mamatay gid siya eventually. Okay? So, but they gina-considered nila ning situation as shock therapy na importante and necessary for long-term economic growth. Kung kanina, ang reason for necessity is pagtaas ng price, ngayon is yung setup na possibility na mamatay yung mga small business or local industries because of the opening of their economies, okay, and the reduction of the tariffs. Okay, so ganito, yun yung setup. Now, the advocates of neoliberalism, particularly President Reagan and Prime Minister Thatcher, somehow to justify the movement of neoliberalism, which they call neoliberalism, ito na klaseng adoption with the Washington Consensus. So they explain it in the household analogy. Sabi ni Thatcher, uh, the country, the nation state, and the government's like a household, wherein the government serves as the mother to budget everything that was given to her. Okay? So, parang kung baga, kung mo lang na, 5,000 lang ang available, ipunon yun, ipaiguon yun na nimo, mo na siya ang principle sa pagsulod sa neoliberalism. Okay? Ang problem lang yan, class, is the household analogy has, or the analogy is not actually fit because governments are not households. Government can print money and they can have constant taxation systems, okay, in order to provide the people a steady flow of income that allows them to pay and refinance debts steadily. So meaning to say, dili lang sila pareha sa isa ka mama sa una nga magulat lang kung pila ang ihatag sa ilahang banang mulay budgetan. Okay? It's not just limited to that. That's the reason why the household analogy has been criticized because, yeah, governments are not households. No, the effects of Washington Consensus. So after the communism or after communism collapse in Russia in 1990s katong pagbuwag talaga ng USSR, the IMF called for immediate privatization of all government industries kasi pag meron pa or nandun pa yung USSR who were very strong in terms of their campaign for communism, ang kakuyaw pagid ani class katong campaign sa Russia ng communism, it's not only affected in the local area, but it tries to reaches other nation state na hindi magi sa nation state but to the people. So possibly, kung titingnan natin, may possibility na maging traidor yung, for example, people from Philippines because they will believe more on the dictators of Russia than the elected officials of the Philippines. So yun yung parang isang effect. Okay? Ay isang situation sa pag-down ng Russia or sa sitwasyon ng Russia. So, with the removal of communism, therefore restrictions, removal of restrictions coming directly from the dictator, so nag-adapt sila of different policies that would allow other private individuals to interact in the society. So mo ilang gibuhat kay gusto man nila nga mag-less intervene ang gobyerno. So nag-advise sila nga ipabaligya ang ilang mga government-owned services to private individuals. Okay? So ang isa din sa solution na o ang isa din sa reason bakit ganun yung solution nila is to remove, okay, the tendencies and the ano sa term nila na the temptation to corrupt, their country's either wealth or borrowed money. Okay? Kasi kahit na sabihin nating ah, na-abandon na ang Bretton Woods system, but the role of World Bank na magpahulam og kwarta kay kinahanglan sa country, nandun pa din. Ang problem lang niyan is, for example, sa Philippines during the time of Manuel Rojas and Elpidio Quirino, so rampant kayo ang corruption. Kay ngano mao pa man tong first stage nga gipahulam ta og kwarta sa World Bank para magamit natin for reconstruction nation building. Okay? But ika nga from different situations mentioned about Elpidio Quirino, gahi gid og ulo ang mga politicians sa una. So manang bisan pag giward na, so nagapadayon lang gyapon. So ina na iyang setup. Now, uh, to reduce the situation of corruption in the government, so they sold the government-owned properties to private individuals. So eventually, nagkaroon ng the rise of oligarchy. Mo ni siya ang isa sa defects sa Washington Consensus. So mas nitaas na ang power sa mga private individuals na at some point, mura na siya nag-appear nga ang nagpadagan sa country. It's not anymore the government but the rich, individuals who accumulated the government-owned services and now perpetuating their own wealth accumulation. So, yan. Kaya hindi natin masisisi yung sitwasyon sa Pilipinas na automatic sa president lang. Kuan yun gihapon ani ang world, especially the leaders of the world before after the Bretton Woods system. Yung sa Washington, the adoption of the Washington Consensus. Kaya gina-pressure nila ang government na ibaligya ang ilang mga products. Now, the shock therapy of neoliberalism actually did not lead to ideal outcomes. Okay? Katong pag-allow na ibaligya ang mga government-owned properties. So, mani siya ang isa sa term na gigamit nila to explain there is a shock therapy na kinahanglan siya as an important step para ma-reduce ang government spending and thereby ma-reduce po ang inflation. Okay? So, ang isa sa case na nakapa-challenge and nakapa-challenge o ah, ang tawag niyan, criticize sa Washington Consensus katong nahitabo sa USA. There is a global financial crisis or there is a economic recession that had happened in USA. Though it can be traced back to the 1980s when US systematically removed various banking investment restriction. So ang isa sa case nito sa global financial crisis class na matrace back sa 1980s kay US because US are so confident na they can actually improve the investments of other countries. Well, they are also using those money invested to them by other countries to invest more money para mas mag-generate or mag-yield of more income. So muna siya. So wala na kay sila nag-restrict sa mga investments coming from different countries. Sige na sila dawat. Eventually, nagkaroon ng problem. Promoting free market, government authorities failed to regulate bad investments. Sige man sila dawat. Okay, so sige man sila dawat, so daghan kay kwarta, especially housing market. So ang ginagawa nila, they keep also investing the money para mag-generate og income. So mag-build og mga houses para i-offer sa mga Americans. Wala nila nakita, class, na when you offering a service like sa housing loan, kahit na you are capable to pay, if you don't have the habit to really pay, so ang ending niyan, ma-mortgage jud niyang mga properties. Okay? So they end up, kumbaga, nagkanit-kanit na, nag-domino effect na. So there were a lot of uh, foreclosed properties because the Americans were not able to sustainably pay their housing loan. And eventually, sa sugod, dili pa kayo sila mahadlok kay syempre, kabalo man sila nga ang housing, bisan pag na-foreclose siya, tungod kay needed siya nga commodity nga puyan sa mga tao. Okay, so they would really pay. But eventually, ganun, wala man na-address sa setup sa government sa America yung bad habits, in terms of bad investments, in terms of letting people buy products na hindi nila kayang magbayad, not because they don't have enough resources, but because of wala silang plano na klaro na magbayad so tungod sa ilang habit. Okay? So kaya ang ending, nagkaroon ng credit records problem. So if you observe, class kayo ng America, they are so particular with credit rating or credit score. Kaya mo na siya ang himong lesson sa ilaha. Okay? Para ma-validate nga pwede ka maka-loan or maka-access ani, kailangan mataas yung credit score mo as a lesson in history. Kaya nag-down dyan ang housing market tungod kasi sila pautang tapos dili makabayad tapos i-offer na po sa uban hangtod sa nag-domino effect. Okay? So, now, crisis spread beyond the United States actually because in truth, there are many investors who were actually foreign governments and corporations and individuals. Take for example, Iceland, Spain, and Greece. Okay, sa setup ni Iceland, nag sevenfold ang utang nila sa World Bank kay tungod na apektuhan ilang mga big banks since dili na sila maka-refinance sa mga loan sa mga tao kay ang kwarta di ay nga supposedly i-refinance nila ilang gi-invest sa housing market na nag-down so wala sila mabawi. Okay? So dutabangan sila sa IMF pero nagkautang sila. Mo na siya isa sa disadvantage kana galing mag-take over na ang IMF. Dako jud kay kaog problema. Aside sa yes, mag-improve ang mga economy balik but murag kumbaga dako kay kagkapasunod. Okay? And you will be in debt so much with the IMF. Okay? So yan. For Greece and Spain naman, class, so probably I'll be sending you a PDF on this para at least maka-follow through kayo. So sa Spain and Greece naman, class, because of so much money invested to US housing, so naapektuhan din yung market nila. So halos umabot sila sa point na naging third world country na sila after they filed for bankruptcy. Ang worst kay nahitabo sa Greece, kay siguro ang part sa ilahang kwarta nga gi-invest sa foreign market is gikuha mismo sa kwarta sa mga pensioners o sa healthcare so that when they request help from or aid from IMF, so ang ending sa ilaha, gi-force sila na mag-cut back sa ilang mga spending, social and public spending. So appeal na dito, it included there the uh, the pension, the spending in healthcare. Naapektuhan din siya taman. Okay? So naapektuhan din siya taman. Now, moving forward, since summarize na lang yung discussion natin. So we proceed with economic globalization today. What's the situation of our economy today? So because the world was so integrated, because of the free trade lagi, because of removing restriction of uh, of the different trade coming to our country and different countries. So nagkaroon tayo ng more integration of economies. However, ang advantage of disadvantage mag-vary pod. If you are a country that produces more products and exported it to other countries, so hayahay ka, okay? Because of the integration of market. Kay first and foremost, in demand man imong products, sumahalin jud, mabaligya jud. Pero kung imported dependent ka like Philippines, okay? So ang ending ana, kita sige tagpalit. Kay mosulod open lang man mosulod ang mga different transnational corporations sa atong countries. Okay? Tapos, ang problema pag sa developing countries is that because of the reduction of tariffs, so, ang naka-benefit more katong mga transnational corporations kaysa sa government. Kay ma-reduce man ang dawaton sa government because of the reduction of tariffs, magsaka pod ang earnings sa transnational corporations. And when we say magsaka ang earning class, dili lang ni siya ginagmay, dinagko ni siya. Muna ang ending, ma-absorb nila usahay ang mga local industries or if not ma-absorb, mga matay kung baga mawala siya sa linya because of that certain situation. So that US, Japan, EU, kanong mga dagko nga mga economy, dagko nga mga country, they grow their national economies through exportation, okay? And eventually, most of the global exports, which is 65%, are parang mas direct sa ilang responsibility kay masigig export sila. So mga developing countries only had for 29%. Okay? So na may advantage gihapon noon ang mga transnational corporations class if it is like Dole or Del Monte. Kani magud sila ng mga transnational corporations. They are not just Philippine-based, they are based abroad, but they stay in the Philippines because they are producing products to be exported to other countries. So, nag-improve. Kaya by 2011, developing countries like Philippines, India, China, Argentina, and Brazil accounted for 51% global exports. So, nagsaka ang ilang pag-export sa products. Okay. Yan yung advantage at disadvantage ng transnational corporations. Posible makatulong siya na mag-increase yung export, pero at the same time, pwede din siyang dahilan bakit namamatay yung local industry natin. So, trade liberalization end up altering the dynamics of global economy. Kay, kumbaga, naging imbalance at the same time, kay mas kumbaga kung ikaw developing country, obliged ka na i-open ang imong economy to other economy. So there is competition, and the worst type of competition is when the local industries died or being absorbed, okay, by the transnational corporations. Pero I think dili kaya ta ng absorbing local industries unlike sa US and other countries. So yan. Now, series of trade talks under the WTO actually led to unprecedented reduction more in tariffs, so mas nigamay, and other trade barriers. But these processes have often been unfair. Bakit? Kay mas nibaba lagi ang earning sa government natin, kay nag-reduce ang tariffs, nagsaka pod ang products nga naging competition ka-compete sa local industry natin. Ang pait pa gid ani class, mahimo siyang double standard sa mga developed countries. For example, Japan. Since Japan tend to be more protectionist, dili sila mahadlok nga wala na yung mga country nga mopalit sa ilaha kay kabalo sila in demand jud ang ilahang products. So, they say when rice products coming from different countries wanted to be sent to Japan, kay syempre obliged, kumbaga gina-encourage nila nga maoging open ang economy nato. So, allowing more competition, so allowing transnational corporations to come into our country. So, ganun. But sa setup ni Japan, sabi niya, dili mo sugot. We do not actually permit na rice products will come into our country because we believe that rice is sacred. So that the one who will generate rice production should only be the Japanese people. So double standard na yun noon. So ginasabi nilang they are only doing it for the sake of sacredness of rice, but at the same time they are protecting their local industry. Kung walay competition man god nga mosulod gikan sa transnational corporation, so since dako kayo og earning ang Japanese government sa exportation, maka-focus sila sa ilang profit or sa ilang earning para mas i-boost nila ilang local industry kay wala na may kay competitor. Ang importante lang, there will be proper regulation para put ang mga local business people will not also abuse the power that is given to them. So inana ang setup. So double standard siya, muna siya na imbalance. So the trade imbalance characterize these economic relations between developed and developing countries. Imagine na sa pag-developing countries ka, obliged kang i-open yung economy, i-reduce imong tariffs. So thereby, less benefiting from the import situations, while the export activities done by different countries to our country have made them increase their economic growth. Okay? And at the same time, sa case, for example, ng US, hindi sila tumatanggap ng mga imported sugar coming from Central America because they would like to boost their own economy by forcing the local industry, the consumers, to buy expensive sugars that they generated. Mag-sacrifice nila ba para sa mga citizen para eventually ma-workout sa government na modaghan na ang supply sa products sa sugar na ma-reduce pod ang iyahang presyo. Kumbaga maki-compete na siya sa Central America. So protectionist jud ilahang setup. So the beneficiaries of global commerce then is not anymore the government, but it's actually the transnational corporations. Kaya ganun yung setup. So that's all about the summaries or the situations today. So instead of going directly to this one, I'll just go over. So we will be discussing siguro next meeting since we still have two meetings before the examination about the history of global politics on the creation of international order. Okay? So ano ba yung direction ng internationalization before bago nagkaroon ng globalization? So the different situations around the world, especially with the role of European countries and the North American countries. So, yan. But as what I mentioned, hindi na lang muna tayo mag-discuss ito ngayon because we will have an activity. Though this one is asynchronous, so you can do it on your own. So, kayo lang mag-agree. I-send ko lang sa inyo yung groupings. Okay? So, here, today, you will be divided into groups discussing topics related to the historical background of globalization. So this is the link. Send ko lang yung link sa dito. Ay, kayo na lang mag-access. So ito yung link. So it will tell us about a brief history of globalization. May mga subtopics dyan. Kaya nga, you're assigned on each of the subtopics. Silk Road routes, spice routes, para mas maintindihan nyo yung historical side. Bakit na-mode yung economy natin today. Okay, spice routes, age of discovery, first wave of globalization, then the world wars, then the second and third wave, then eventually the so-called globalization 4.0, the coming of the AI. Okay? Yung deep advancement of different products. If you belong to the world wars class, you can access more information, not limited to the link that I've given you kasi medyo madami din yung dapat na i-mention sa sa anong tawag nito? Sa World Wars. Okay, so I'll be sending the groupings class. I-send ko sa GC natin regardless of wala ka ngayon or hindi para at least mabigyan natin ng chance yung lahat. Anyway, this will be in a form of an assignment. Gawin niyo today, okay? You agree on how to do it. Bibigyan din ako ng instruction kung ano yung gagawin nyo. Tapos, isend nyo yung deadlines of submission. Send nyo sa Google link or sa Google folder na akong i-send ko dire. Tapos, by group na siya. So, I'll give an instruction. So, ito yung questions na saan na yun? Yeah, ito yung questions. So, this is 30 points class na class activity. Ay, no, pwede ba yun? Dito na lang to sa GC. So, you need to answer the following questions. I-access na ako. So, find time to communicate with your members. I'll give you the rest of the time. Kayo ang mag-agree kung mag-discuss mo ano yung sa inyong setup. Ang importante pasa on or before next week on the same day. Okay. So we will be talking about the brief history of globalization here para mas maintindihan nyo. It will also cover up in our examination. Okay. Yan. So, kayo na mag-agree kung ano yung gagawin niyo after this. So, i-send ko sa GC natin din, ha. Tatlo lang yung question. First question, what is the main point of the topic na na-assign sa inyo, ha? Okay. Second question is, what are the developments, specific events, or yeah, important events that shape the world economy because of those events and developments. And the third one, what is the implication of this lesson, atong sa history of globalization, to you as a student? Okay? So, nanang GC, nanapod ang uh, questions and other, I'll give an additional instruction kung saan ito i-send. So for the remaining of the time class, you will be on your own to group and discuss kung paano niyo ito i-address. Ang importante lang, you'll be able to send a video discussion on this one. So mga 5 to 7 minutes lang siguro. So dapat present mo tanan kahit na hindi lahat magsasalita dito. Okay? Synthesizing this discussion. Okay? The three questions. Okay? Any question muna about our discussion on world economy class? Do you have any question? Are you still around? Nandito pa ba tayo sa virtual room? Okay, so may mga reaction na. So, but do you have question? Okay, can you type in the chat box if you don't have so that I will know na ang inyong ano is wala kayong tanong about the discussion kanina. May tanong ba about sa discussion kanina? Okay, yung iba nagsabi na nawala. Okay, so I hope there is none because nanay ka ng nagpadayon na quiz assignment. Okay? It will be due for next week at the same time. So, yan. This will be our material for next week. Ito, material for next week. So, do you have any question about the instruction kung ano yung gagawin niyo? May ano kayo? Question? So again, let me repeat ha, since walang nagsasalita. Anyway, I don't know if naka-follow through ba kayo sa instruction. I'll repeat to make it clear. You will be in your group today, so you will have to find time to meet. Then discuss how you will be able to fulfill this task of answering the series of questions, reading, okay, the link or the website that I have sent to you about the brief history of globalization and submitting it on or before next week. So that would probably Friday next week, 11:59 p.m. I'll just send you more instruction kung saan i-send, ano yung file name. Okay? Just make sure you send it uh, on or before the date class ha. I'm giving 1 week to give you time, which means to say there is no enough reason na hindi mapasa. Okay? Or late ang pagpasa. So I hope it's clear. And as I mentioned, yung quiz assignment natin on this topic is given to you for 1 week. So it's also we do not actually have any options anymore to say that we were not able to answer kay 1 week gihatag. Okay, the same thing din pala sa last week na binigay ko, quiz assignment din yon. Okay? So I hope we are clear on that. So we only entertain valid reasons na kumbaga wala jud mo nakasulod og klase for 1 week kay wala jud may internet or abroad mo ana nga time mo nang wala mo ka-take og quiz assignment. Kana lang gyud siguro atong ma-consider nga valid reason or nagkasakit mo or yung sabay nahitabo diha nga 1 week mo dili pwede. Okay? Because quiz assignment is usually given out kanang isa ka semana. Okay? So I hope we are clear on that. Now, do you have any concern with the instruction, with additional instruction or anything that you would like to have? Nabay concern? Okay, wala kay Sophia. How about the others? Or mag-ano na lang ta, mag-oral recitation na lang ta. Murag wala may nag-comment. Murag nangatulog pa man siguro ning uban. Yes, yes, at least may clarification. Yes, Lauren. Wait, basahin ko. Yes, kailangan lahat nandun sa video makita. Okay. As part of the group activity. Kahit na few people lang, hindi lahat magsasalita about the three questions. Pero importante that everyone is around. Okay? So, kasi this is a group activity. Okay? So, yan, recorded lang siya. Send lang ninyo sa ano. So, this will help you more eventually understand this topic. Simplified lang kayo siya. Pwede ra ninyo kamukha mo rin magbasa. Pwede ra ganin individual. Kaya lang, syempre mo taas mo ang inyong ang trabaho and at the same time modaghan pod ang inyong buhaton. So at least kani kaisa lang grupo na you will be earning murag kumbaga a good score. Actually, mura na siya bonus na ako para ma-improve ang inyong scoring. Kay if you are able to answer this one based on the readings, so automatically you will get the 30 points. So makatabang siya para musaka ang inyong class standing. So inyong activities. So labi na pag few lang ato ang mga activities ko. Kumbaga as I check murag mudagan ra tag 5 activities overall for the whole period. Supposedly kailangan gani mas daghanon pa nato pero maluoy pud ta nga sige taghatag og activity kaisa kaduha ka isa or katulo usahay sa isa ka week. So nangangay gi-send nga readings para i-quiz assignment na pag-i-quiz. So lisod pod. So we try to balance as much at some point. So I know you're also busy with your RLE. Probably now you will be having classes after this one. Kay ang inyong schedule, 3 days lang mo available sa klase na kung may laboratory. So I understand that one. Okay? Kaya lang, we need to check also how much have you learned. Okay? So sometimes, magpa-oral recitation ko, kung naka-follow through pa ba kayo, or maghatag ako, o magbibigay ako ng quiz, anong tawag nito? Time quiz. Probably by next meeting, I'll be giving you a time quiz sa Quiper. So mga 30 to 45 minutes before our time, you need to take up the quiz about globalization of world economy and the new one, history of global politics. So just prepare. Okay? Just prepare. Para at least ma-arrange natin. Okay? So, wala na bang ibang tanong? Sir, mag-send ka. I think na-send ko na sa GC natin both the PPT and the recorded discussion. Okay? So na-send ko na sa GC natin last week pa. So i-discuss ko lang ito kanina para at least ma-review kayo. Baka kasi nag-struggle din kayo sa pagpakinig sa recorded discussion ko kasi it runs more than 2 hours. So dalawang ano. But I hope you were able to watch and listen to that. Kaya narito ang mga details ng discussion. So, hopefully. Okay? Wala na. Okay. So, just reach out to me class ha pag may mga concern. I'm explaining ha. Wala ko nagkuhan og laing meaning sa kung ang gina-explain. Okay? I'm just explaining para at least aware kayo sa mga mangyayari at sa mga posibleng implications sa mga bagay-bagay. Okay? So I always appreciate students asking questions, not just about the discussion that I have, but also in terms of clarification para at least dili gud na ni ma-misunderstood or dili ma-fail sa pag-follow sa instruction kay pag instruction mamali daan so mamali gud mismo ang pag implement sa activity. So as much as possible, we will avoid that one. Okay? So, wala na ba? Wala na ba gustong maghabol? Okay, I hope yung silence natin is wala na talaga. So, since I don't know kasi kung ano na yung case niyo, kung wala na ba talaga or wala na kayo dito ngayon, wala na yung iba dito. Okay? But I appreciate your presence today, class. May ibang mga section kasi na magsugod mig 40, mahuman mig 30 kapin. So, sinasabi ko sa kanila na I may end up sa inyong section mag-attendance ko at the end of the class. Okay? Marami sa inyo biglang nawawala, walang explanation, nawawala lang talaga. Eh, maganda at mabuti sana if people will reach out katong nawawala, pero hindi man. So, consider siya ng cutting class. Okay? At least in our case, na-maintain natin. But I hope wala na kayong tanong. If may tanong kayo, class, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll be willing to answer it during my free time. Okay? Especially addressing your different concern if there is a need. Okay? So, I think I will give you this time kung mag-meet mo about this one. Dali lang man kayo ang activity. Actually, tulo lang ka-question. So, pwede gani mag-assign na mo directly. Tapos, i-record ninyo dayon. Then, mag-submit na dayon mo para at least dili matapok inyong trabaho. Anyway, you still have 30 minutes pa naman. So, if there are no questions, probably we can end with a prayer. Okay? So let us pause for a while and pray for God's blessing. The name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. So long, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Ingat kayo palagi. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you po, sir.
Welcome, everyone.